Now, we have come to the last storyteller, and what we need to do is don't give all your energy because we're going to have to do that 2 more times. So let's give about an 8.5 worth of energy for our final storyteller. Fuck it, make it a 10.0 worth of energy for our last storyteller. He needs it right now. His name is Bryan Kett. Keep going until he gets up here. There we go.
Hi. When I was 22, I was hired to teach science at an international high school. Students were from 75 different countries, everywhere from New Zealand to Mongolia to France. And lots of these students wound up in school-wide gangs. And this threw me off a little bit because up until this point, my biggest exposure to gangs had been West Side Story. And these kids didn't settle disputes with their rivals by having dance-offs. Instead, they would fight out of loyalty because these gang leaders rewarded loyalty. And I didn't really get that dynamic. I just wanted to learn with my students. The problem was that they hated class and they hated me. Every day they would stare at me with this intensity, and I knew that I had to break them of their gang mentality in our class. And I would do this through 2 key tactics. 1, I wouldn't miss a day of school. I'd be this ongoing positive presence in their lives. And 2, every week I would make them participate in team building activities. And this didn't land. Nobody wanted to play 2 truths and a lie with me. But I persisted. And by never missing a day, I really began to pretty much just wear them down. And it was around Thanksgiving, and we were doing trust falls in class. When Danny, one of my rougher students, he spoke up and he announced to the room that what we were doing was quote unquote kind of cool. And I knew right then and there that I had them, that they were mine. I knew that I had broken them of their gang mentality. I'd never have to deal with that ever again. And from then on, teaching was great. Even though we were from all over the globe, we were all on the same team. But a few months later, I was summoned for 1 day of in-school technology training. This meant that I was going to have to miss class for the first time, and there was going to be a substitute. And I was so worried that my students were going to treat the sub the same way they used to treat me. So the day before I was going to be gone, I read my class the riot act. I said the substitute was a guest in our classroom. The substitute would be treated with respect. And if the substitute wrote down any student's name for misbehaving, when I got back the next day, I would send that student straight to the dean, no questions asked. And they told me they understood. And so the next day, training started a little late. I popped into my classroom just to make sure everything was going okay, and it was. All my students were quietly working, and it made me so happy. And they were so happy to see me, but I just gave them a little wave, and I went up to the sub, who I recognized. She was a retired teacher in the district, and she was a hard ass. She looked like a federal judge. And I went up to her, I said, "Hi, ma'am, I'm Bryan, this is my class. I just want to make sure everything's going okay." And she looked up from the romance novel she was reading. And in this voice, it sounded like she just ate a pack of cigarettes. She said, "I think I can handle it." And I said, "Oh, ma'am, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean like that. In the past, I've just had some problems," but she cut me off. She said, "I got it, because I'm not an idiot." I was so taken aback. And I looked over at my students, and they weren't smiling anymore because they saw how she spoke to me. And I saw something in their eyes that hadn't been there since the beginning of the school year. It was that intensity. They were really worked up. I'm not proud of this. But I was so offended with how she spoke to me that I didn't try to calm my students down. Instead, I just told her, "Okay, good luck." And then I turned to my students and I gave them a nod that said, "I'll let you take it from here." And then I walked out. And as I headed down the hallway behind me in my classroom, I could hear voices getting louder and chairs scraping against the floor, and I kept walking. And after my day of training, I felt guilty, right? I felt like I should have done more to have ensured that class had gone smoothly, but I was certain it had because the substitute was a veteran teacher. And I found her at my mailbox dropping off her report. And that was the first time I had ever seen someone whose soul was truly broken. She walked past me in a daze, just this shell of a human. I thought, what have I done? And on her report, she had written down the names of every single one of my students for misbehaving. It looked like the Declaration of Independence. And it was littered with all these phrases like insubordination and refusing to sit down, and my personal favorite, constantly meowing. And so the next day I went to class ready to reprimand everyone, but before I could, Danny spoke up. He said the substitute deserved it because she had disrespected me. And everyone else agreed. And in that moment, it hit me that in our class, I had never broken these kids of their gang mentality. I had just taken on the role of leader. And it felt fantastic. And with that power, I decided that no one at school was ever going to disrespect me again. So I didn't write up a single kid. No one was sent down to the dean. Yeah, things had gotten a little heated with the sub, but they were just being loyal. And like every other gang leader at school, I rewarded loyalty. Thanks.